There is something different about a scout camp on Saturday morning. Not better, not worse, just different. If you've spent a week at camp, you can feel it the moment you wake up. The sounds have changed. Instead of scouts hurrying toward breakfast, you hear tent zippers opening, duffel bags being packed, patrol boxes being loaded into trailers, and leaders calling out, "Has anyone seen the dining fly?" Or, "Don't forget to check under your cot." By Saturday morning, the routines that felt so familiar only a day ago have already begun to disappear. The flags will be lowered one last time. The dining hall will serve one final breakfast. The campsites that felt like home for an entire week will soon be empty. In a few hours, hundreds of scouts and leaders will drive through the front gate and head back toward everyday life. It feels like camp is ending, but over the years, I've come to believe something different. Maybe camp doesn't really end on Saturday morning. Maybe Saturday morning is simply the moment when everything that happened during the week begins to become part of the rest of the scouting year. Today, I want to spend a few minutes reflecting on that quiet transition, on what happens after camp, on the ride home, and on how 1 week at scout camp continues to shape a troop long after the tents have been packed away. Welcome to Meet Me at the Grizz, the podcast where we explore the people, places, traditions, and experiences that make scout camp such an important part of scouting. I'm Ken Clough, author of The Next Campfire, longtime scout leader and volunteer at Rotary Scout Reservation. Each episode we gather around the campfire, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, to talk about the experiences that shape scouts, strengthen leaders, and remind us why these places continue to matter. So, pull up a camp chair, take a deep breath, and meet me at the Grizz. The rhythm has changed. There is a rhythm to camp. Last week, I recorded an episode at Rotary Scout Reservation called The Rhythm of Camp. Sitting at camp, I talked about the steady cadence of camp life, the sounds of scouts walking the trails to program areas, leaders checking in with one another, chess games on the trading post porch, the quiet moments between scheduled activities, and the pace of a place that still moves according to people instead of notifications. Every day at camp has its own rhythm. Monday feels different from Wednesday. Wednesday feels different from Friday. And Saturday? Well, Saturday has a rhythm all its own. If Monday is filled with anticipation, Saturday is filled with reflection. The same campsites are there, the same trees, the same trails, the same parade field, but everything feels different because everyone knows it is time to go home. Instead of heading toward nature or handicrafts or shooting sports, scouts are rolling sleeping bags, stuffing clothes into duffel bags, and trying to figure out how everything that somehow fit into their backpack 6 days ago no longer seems to fit. Leaders are making one last walk through the campsite, checking the tents, looking at their cots, making sure the patrol boxes are loaded, counting gear, making sure nothing gets left behind. The trailer door closes. Then someone realizes they forgot the lantern. The trailer door opens again. Every troop has that moment. There's something comforting about those little traditions. They're the same every year. Taking one last look. As I walk through camp on Saturday morning, I always notice something else. People slow down. Earlier in the week, everyone was focused on what came next. The next merit badge, the next meal, the next activity, the next campfire. Saturday isn't about what's next at camp. It's about taking one last look. You see scouts standing together in front of their campsite, taking pictures together. Friends exchanging phone numbers or social media information. Leaders thanking commissioners. Camp staff saying goodbye to the scouts they've spent the week teaching. A scout walks back to the waterfront one last time because that's where they finally passed the swim test. Another stops by the climbing tower for one more photograph. Someone else wants one last visit to the trading post before climbing into the car. Those aren't scheduled activities. No one tells them to do it. They just happen, because we often don't realize which places have become meaningful until it's time to leave them. Already thinking about next year. One of my favorite moments happens almost every Saturday. You'll hear a scout ask a question that seems incredibly simple. So, what week are we coming back next year? Think about that for a moment. They're still standing in camp. The trailer hasn't even left the campsite. The tents are still standing. And already, they're thinking about next summer. That question tells you everything you need to know about whether camp mattered. No one asks about returning to a place that didn't leave an impression. That simple question is really another way of saying, I belong here. I want to experience this again. I'm already looking forward to coming back. For many scouts, camp doesn't become a memory when they leave. It becomes something they immediately begin anticipating all over again. The leader's perspective. The interesting thing is that adults experience Saturday differently. Scouts are usually thinking about the week they just had. Leaders are often thinking about everything that comes next. They're happy. They're proud. They're probably a little tired. Well, maybe more than a little tired. They've spent the week making sure everyone got to merit badges on time, helping homesick scouts, solving problems, answering questions, and making 100 little decisions that most scouts never even notice. Now, as the trailer pulls away from camp, many of those leaders finally have a chance to exhale. The week they've been planning for months is over. For a few moments, they simply enjoy watching the camp disappear in the rearview mirror. Not because they're glad it's over, but because they're grateful it happened. What we carry home. That's one of the wonderful things about volunteering and scouting. The week is exhausting, and yet, before long, most leaders begin talking about coming back. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. Every Scoutmaster knows there are moments during the week when you're dealing with forgotten gear, unexpected weather, schedule changes, homesickness, or any number of challenges. But those moments are rarely what you remember. You remember the first-year scout who finally gained enough confidence to walk into the dining hall with new friends. You remember the scout who climbed the tower after insisting they were afraid of heights. You remember the patrol laughing together while cleaning dishes. You remember the evening campfire, the conversations after lights out. Those are the things that stay with you. And as you leave camp on Saturday morning, you begin to realize that what you're carrying home isn't just camping gear. You're carrying stories. You're carrying memories. And you're carrying moments that will become part of your troop long after the tents have been packed away. Camp comes home. As the last few miles of Camp Road disappear behind you, something interesting begins to happen. The week starts to settle. For 6 days, everyone has been living in the moment. There was always another merit badge to get to, another meal to eat, another activity waiting around the corner. Camp moves from sunrise to lights out with very little time to stop and reflect. The ride home is different. For the first time all week, there is nowhere to be. No one signaling the next activity. No announcements. No schedule to keep. Just a road stretching ahead and time to think about the week that just ended. For some scouts, the ride home is full of conversation. They can't wait to tell everyone about the fish they caught, or the merit badge they completed, or the campfire skit that had everyone laughing, or the new friends that they made from another troop. For other scouts, the ride home is much quieter. The excitement of the week catches up with them. Before the troop has even reached the highway, they're asleep against the window. Both reactions tell the same story. Camp has taken something out of them and giving them something back in return. The stories come home. For parents, Saturday is often the first time they really experience camp. They weren't there for the morning flag ceremony. They didn't hear the laughter in the campsite after dinner. They weren't sitting beside the lake as the sun came up. Throughout the week, they may have seen a few pictures posted online. Perhaps they received a brief text message or heard a short phone call home. They caught glimpses of camp, but only glimpses. Now the stories begin, but not all at once. They come out while unpacking the car, over dinner that evening, while showing a camp patch or a new t-shirt from the trading post, looking through the troop photograph. One story reminds them of another. One memory leads to the next. Parents begin to hear about the scout who became a new friend, the hike that turned into an adventure, the rainstorm that everyone will laugh about for years, the meal that tasted surprisingly good because everyone worked together to cook it, or the challenge that seemed impossible on Monday but somehow became manageable by Thursday. And somewhere in those stories, parents will begin to understand something they couldn't see while their scout was away. Their son or daughter came home just a little different, maybe more confident, maybe more independent, maybe a little bit more willing to take responsibility. Those changes are often subtle, but they are real, and sometimes it takes a parent to notice them before the scout does. Turning a week into a year. While families are hearing stories, troop leaders are beginning a different kind of work. Not the work of camp, but the work that grows out of camp. Advancement records are reviewed to make sure each scout receives credit for what they accomplished. Leaders identify merit badges that were completed and those that still have a few remaining requirements. Partial completions aren't failures. They're invitations to keep learning after camp is over. Plans begin for the troop's next court of honor. That ceremony may only last an hour, but it represents months of effort. Merit badges earned during camp will be presented. Rank advancements will be recognized. Families will once again gather to celebrate what their scouts have accomplished. The troop photograph finds its way into emails, newsletters, social media posts, and on refrigerators. Equipment is unpacked, cleaned, repaired, and put away. Camp evaluations are discussed. What worked well? What should we do differently? What should we make sure never changes? Experienced Scoutmasters know these conversations aren't about criticizing the week. They're about making next year's experience even better. Already thinking about next summer. It never takes long. Sometimes only a few days. Then someone sends a text. What week are we thinking about for next year? Maybe a campsite is already being discussed. Maybe a program area that everyone loved. Maybe one that everyone wants to try for the first time. Scouts begin to say things like, next year I'm taking climbing. I'm finally old enough for shotgun shooting. I want to be on camp staff someday. Those aren't just plans. They're signs that camp has become part of their future. 1 week has changed the way they see the next year, and perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts Scout Camp gives us. It doesn't simply create memories, it creates anticipation. It gives Scouts something to look forward to. It gives leaders renewed energy. It gives troops a shared experience that they'll talk about for months. Long after the tents have been folded and the trailers have been unpacked, camp continues to shape the life of the troop. Camp never really ends. We often say that Scout Camp lasts 1 week, and technically that's true. The campsites are empty, the parade field becomes quiet, the sounds of camp fade away. But if you've been around scouting long enough, you know that's not the whole story. Camp continues every time a scout teaches another scout a skill they learned during the week. It continues when a merit badge sparks a lifelong hobby or even a career. It continues at troop meetings where inside jokes from camp still make everyone laugh. It continues during a court of honor when families applaud accomplishments that began on a trail, in a campsite, or beside a lake. It continues when a younger scout listens to an older scout describe camp and decides they want to go next year. And it continues in the quiet confidence that grows when a young person realizes they can do more than they thought possible. That's why camp matters. Not because of 6 days on a calendar, but because of what those 6 days make possible during the other 51 weeks of the year. Wrapping things up. As I think about another camp season coming to a close, I am reminded that we often focus on the visible parts of scouting. The tents, the flags, the campsites, the merit badges, or the ceremonies. Those things are important. But what really endures are the experiences they create. The friendships, the confidence, the stories, the traditions that each troop carries home and passes along to the next generation. Saturday morning may mark the end of a week of camp, but it also marks the beginning of everything camp will continue to mean throughout the upcoming year. Camp ends, but scouting continues, and that's exactly how it should be. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Meet Me at the Grizz. If today's conversation brought back memories of your own weeks at camp, I'd love to hear about them. What do you remember most about that last morning? What traditions does your troop have when it's time to head home? And what part of camp seems to stay with you long after the gear has been unpacked? If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following the podcast and sharing it with another Scout leader, volunteer, parent, or anyone else who believes in the value of Scout Camp. Your support helps more people discover these stories and keeps the conversation going. Until next time, I'm Ken Clough. Take care of one another, keep the campfire burning, and of course, I'll meet you at the Grizz.